Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Dark Fears family. Tonight, we're venturing deep into a place many call beautiful, but few truly understand. Yellowstone National Park, a land of boiling earth, endless forests, and miles of wilderness where the silence feels too heavy to be natural. And in this video, we'll uncover the 7 most disturbing, true Yellowstone Park Ranger horror stories ever recorded. But before we begin, let me ask you something. What do you think happens when the forest watches you back? Because the rangers who survived these encounters swear the park is hiding more than wildlife. Just a few summers ago, a veteran ranger reported seeing a pair of glowing eyes stalking him from tree to tree. Not animal, not human, but something that moved with deliberate intelligence. He said he could feel its breath on the back of his neck, even though he was completely alone. Tonight, stories like that await you. So settle in, turn down the lights, and if you're new here, join the Dark Fears family by subscribing and tapping the bell. Now, let's begin. My name is Evan Hale, and for 9 years I worked as a backcountry ranger in Yellowstone. I loved the silence, the untouched wilderness, and the sense that the park was older and wiser than any of us. But one winter assignment changed every way I looked at those forests. It happened during a freak cold snap that dropped the temperatures so low, the thermal areas created massive rolling clouds of fog. Thick, shifting walls that swallowed entire valleys. The park was closed to tourists, so only essential ranger patrols continued. My job was simple. Record geothermal activity near the Norris Geyser Basin and report any unusual readings. I'd done this routine dozens of times. But that week, rangers started reporting strange silhouettes moving inside the thermal fog. Shapes that looked human, but too tall, too still, and too silent to be hikers. We brushed it off as optical illusions, until the radio call came from a station only 4 miles from mine. A ranger named Lydia, tough as nails, whispered over the radio. "Something's following me, inside the steam. It's walking where there shouldn't be ground." That was the last transmission. They sent me to investigate because I was closest. I remember hiking into a cloud of sulfur-thick steam, calling her name, and hearing a second voice call mine. A voice that wasn't hers. The deeper I moved into the fog, the more the world vanished. My flashlight beam dissolved only a few feet ahead. The sulfur burned my throat, and every footstep echoed strangely, as if bouncing off unseen walls. "Lydia!" I shouted again. No response. But I heard breathing, slow, heavy, too close. The kind of breathing that vibrates in your bones rather than your ears. I spun around, flashlight shaking, but the steam revealed nothing. Then, through the whiteness, I saw a shape. A human outline, slightly hunched, completely still. "Lydia?" I said cautiously. The figure didn't answer. I took 1 step forward. The shape took 1 step backward, perfectly synchronized, not retreating, mimicking. I froze. I whispered softly, "Who's there?" The shape tilted its head at the same angle as mine. Same speed, same timing. But when I exhaled, I noticed something horrifying. My breath fogged in the cold. The figure's breath did not. It wasn't alive. I slowly lifted my arm. The shape lifted its arm, but not like a reflection. Its movement lagged behind by half a second, like it was studying me before copying. And then, in a voice that sounded exactly like mine, it whispered, "Evan?" I stumbled back. That half-second delay vanished. The shape suddenly jerked forward, closing 15 feet in an instant. I ran. I sprinted blindly through the fog, my boots slipping on patches of ice hidden beneath the frost. The steam distorted sound so badly that I couldn't tell if the footsteps chasing me were close or inside my own skull. Something moved to my left. Fast, gliding, not running. I stopped dead. That was when I saw it again. Except now the shape was no longer mimicking me. It stood taller, much taller, its limbs too long, its posture stretched in unnatural angles like it was unfolding itself the more it watched me. Its face, if you could call it that, was a smooth oval, like steam pressed against glass. No eyes, no mouth. But I felt it looking at me, studying me. Then it spoke again. But this time, it used Lydia's voice. "Evan, help me." Every survival instinct screamed at me to ignore it, but guilt clawed at my chest. What if she was alive? What if she needed me? I forced myself toward the voice. The figure slowly sank into the fog like it was melting into the steam itself. As soon as it vanished, the fog thinned slightly, enough for me to see something on the ground. Lydia's radio, still warm, still on, still transmitting a faint static crackle. "Evan," her voice whispered again. But it wasn't coming from the radio. It was coming from directly behind me. I spun around so fast, I fell backward into the snow. My flashlight beam flickered across swirling fog. But this time, I wasn't alone. A footprint appeared in the snow 2 feet in front of me. Then another. Then another. One by one, prints pressed into the snow as if an invisible person was walking toward me. Slow, deliberate, confident. I scrambled back, gasping. The prints stopped just inches from my boots. The air grew warm, too warm, like standing next to a geyser vent blasting steam. My skin burned from the sudden temperature change. I could hear it breathing again, slow, heavy, wet. Then something touched my shoulder. Not a hand, not a claw. Something that felt like hot vapor kneading into my jacket, sinking through the fabric like fingers made of steam. I screamed and rolled away. When I looked up, something solid was forming in front of me. Humanoid. Tall, lean, its body rising from the fog, shaping itself like a figure condensing inside a glass. It leaned close to me, its smooth face inches from mine. Its head twitched in short, jerky movements, as if trying to learn how a face worked. Then, in Lydia's trembling voice, it said, "Why? Did you leave me?" I shook violently. I didn't. Where are you?" I yelled. The figure paused, and in my own voice, it whispered, "Right here." I bolted again, this time toward the geyser boardwalks, where the ground was stable and less foggy. My lungs burned. My legs felt heavy, like wading through boiling water. But something was wrong. The fog followed me. It didn't drift with the wind like normal. It poured after me in a straight line, funneled, directed, like the thing controlled it. I reached the wooden boardwalk and collapsed onto it, coughing hard. The steam stopped at the edge, swirling in a perfect curved wall in front of me. Then a shape stepped out, not towering this time, not stretched, perfectly human-sized, perfectly still. The fogman spoke in Lydia's voice again. "It hurts. Evan, don't leave me." I felt a tear freeze on my cheek. "Where are you?" I yelled into the fog. "Show me where you are." The shape tilted its head. This time, it nodded. Slowly, it raised an arm and pointed toward the far side of the basin, toward a cluster of smaller thermal pools where the fog swirled unnaturally fast, like water boiling too hard. My blood ran cold, because beneath the steam, I could see something dark in the snow. A jacket, a glove, a patch of red. For a moment, I thought it was blood. But when I got closer, it wasn't blood. It was heat burn marks, circular patterns in the snow where something extremely hot had pressed against it, dragged something through it. I followed the burn tracks cautiously, every step crunching the thin ice that formed over the hot ground. The steam grew hotter, thicker, swirling like it was alive. Then I saw her, or what was left of her. Lydia lay half submerged in the snow against a fallen log. Her jacket melted in patches. Her skin, God. Parts of it looked boiled, as though she'd been exposed to scalding water. But her expression was the worst. Her eyes were wide open, her mouth frozen mid-scream. No signs of struggle, just pure terror. But something was wrong. The ground around her wasn't disturbed except for the burn marks. No footprints. No signs she'd fought or crawled. It was as if she'd been placed there gently, like a doll. My radio crackled suddenly, making me jerk. "Evan?" Lydia's voice whispered. I slowly lifted the radio. "Evan, help me." But the voice wasn't coming from the speaker. It was coming from Lydia's body. Her lips moved, her chest didn't rise, her lungs didn't work. But her lips moved as steam puffed out from her throat, like the thing was using her body as a vent. My stomach twisted violently as the body exhaled a final puff of hot vapor. Then a shadow rose behind her. Tall, bending, stretching out of the fog like a nightmare unfolding. It had been here the whole time, watching me, learning me. The creature stepped forward, unfolding itself to its full, terrible height. Its limbs stretched like softened glass, bending at angles that made my stomach flip. The fog swirled tighter around it, forming a cloak that shifted like slow-motion fire. I backed away, nearly slipping into a shallow thermal pool. The creature moved without sound, sliding more than walking, its body twitching as it studied me. Occasionally, a stray limb would snap into a new position, like a dislocated joint popping back into place. Then, it spoke. But this time, it used several voices layered together. Mine, Lydia's, other rangers' voices I recognized. Voices of people who'd gone missing. "Cold hurts us," it said. "Heat feeds us." It took another step closer. The steam around its body pulsed like a heartbeat. "We want your shape." That sentence broke whatever survival instinct had kept me in place. I hurled myself backward and sprinted across the boardwalk toward the tree line. The fog erupted behind me like a living storm, chasing me in a straight line. The creature didn't need to run. The fog did the running for it. I crashed into the forest, branches smacking my face and arms. The fog rolled after me, slipping through trees like liquid. I could hear it mimicking my breathing again, then my crying, then my screaming. I spotted an old ranger shelter ahead, a wooden supply hut barely big enough for 2 people. I slammed the door behind me and braced it with everything inside. Crates, tools, my own body weight. Outside, the fog wrapped the hut in a shivering white cocoon. Something dragged itself across the walls, slowly, scraping, testing. The creature whispered through the cracks, using my voice. "Let me in. Evan, you're freezing." I clamped my hands over my ears, but its voice pressed directly into my mind. I grabbed my emergency flare kit, only 1 flare left. I knew heat attracted the thing, but fire wasn't just heat. Fire was chaos. Maybe that mattered. I lit the flare. The instant the red flame hissed, the fog outside recoiled violently as if slapped. The creature shrieked, a sound like steam ripping through metal. Then, silence. The fog thinned, retreated, pulled back into the trees like it was hiding. The flare sputtered. I stared at the glowing ember. It was the only thing keeping me alive. When it finally died, the cold swallowed me whole, and from the darkness outside, something whispered again, not mimicking this time, not imitating. It used its real voice, a deep, wet, boiling whisper. "We found your warmth." I burst out of the hut before the darkness fully retook it, sprinting toward the service road. The sky was beginning to brighten at the horizon. Dawn. The temperature was dropping even more, and the cold burned my skin with every breath. The fog creature stayed near the trees, avoiding the open road. I kept running until I reached my snowmobile. I fumbled with the keys, hands shaking uncontrollably. Behind me, the fog drifted out of the forest. But slower now. Hesitant. The engine roared to life. As I accelerated across the frozen valley, I glanced back. The creature stepped partially out of the fog, just its head and shoulders visible. Its body twitched and contracted as if shrinking in the cold. And then, it mimicked me again. Its entire body snapped into my shape. My height, my posture, my exact silhouette. It raised a hand and waved, in perfect sync with the way I'd waved earlier that morning to another ranger. I nearly crashed from the shock. I didn't look back again until I reached the main outpost. When I did, the fog had vanished completely. But at the tree line, pressed into a tall drift of snow, I saw something burned into the surface. A perfect human-shaped imprint. My imprint, still warm. The investigation team dismissed Lydia's death as thermal exposure. They called the burn marks geothermal anomalies. And as for my report, they chalked it up to hypothermia-induced hallucinations. But 2 days later, a veteran ranger pulled me aside. He'd worked Yellowstone for 36 years and rarely spoke. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette. "You're not crazy," he whispered. "I saw it once, back in '98. I froze. He nodded toward the thermal fog drifting far in the distance. "That thing. It's older than the park, older than people. It mimics warmth, it mimics life. And when someone dies near those geysers, sometimes it tries them on like clothes." My stomach twisted. "What does it want?" I asked. The old ranger exhaled smoke through trembling fingers. "A body," he said softly. "One that fits." That night, long after I'd returned to my cabin, I found something outside my door. Something burned into the snow, tall, perfect, unmistakable. An imprint of my body, still warm. And as I stared at it, a whisper drifted through the trees, a voice layered with mine, Lydia's, and dozens more. "We will wear you. Soon." That was the last night I ever worked in Yellowstone. But even now, when winter fog rolls across my street back home, I sometimes see a shape inside it, waiting, studying, learning me. My name is Riley Turner, and I've been a ranger at Yellowstone for just over 6 years. I've dealt with everything, from tourists trying to pet bison to backcountry hikers ignoring avalanche signs. But nothing prepared me for what I saw at Mammoth Hot Springs during the late winter season of 2021. The upper terraces had been unexpectedly quiet for days. Animals avoided the area. Even the ravens, usually fearless scavengers, circled high above instead of landing near the steaming white rock. Something felt wrong the moment I arrived for my shift, but I brushed it off. Winter fatigue can mess with your senses. That afternoon, I got a report of a large animal standing motionless on the terraces. The caller insisted it wasn't a bear, elk, or wolf. They described it as a tall, pale figure, like a person frozen in place. I assumed they'd misidentified a sun-bleached tree stump, but as a ranger, I had to confirm. When I climbed the boardwalk and looked across the terraces, I spotted something I still can't explain. A tall, white humanoid shape stood near the mineral deposits, perfectly still, as though carved from the limestone itself. At first glance, I thought it was a statue. Yellowstone didn't have statues, and it was facing me, directly. That was when something deep in my gut told me to leave. But I walked closer anyway. The closer I got, the more wrong the figure looked. It wasn't shaped like any person I'd ever seen. Its limbs were too long, its torso too narrow, its shoulders sloped like softened wax. Its skin, if you could call it that, was the exact color of the chalky mineral deposits behind it. The creature's surface looked cracked, as though its body had formed from dried mud and had never fully hardened. I lifted my binoculars slowly. When the lenses focused, my breath caught in my throat. The figure didn't have a face. No eyes, no mouth, no lines where a face should have been. Just a smooth expanse of pale surface. But somehow I felt it staring back at me. Then it moved. The shift was small, almost subtle. A slow tilt of the head, too smooth, too silent, too deliberate. My legs locked. Every instinct screamed at me to run. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. I lowered the binoculars, heart racing. When I looked again with my naked eyes, the figure was several feet closer. I hadn't seen it move. Steam rolled across its body, and for a split second, it appeared to change shape, its outline bending like heat distortion. I stepped back. The boardwalk creaked beneath me. The sound echoed unnaturally across the terraces, as if the entire landscape was listening. I tried radioing the outpost, but all I got was static, thick, warbling interference that sounded like someone breathing inside the speaker. I turned around to retreat toward the parking area, but the walkway ahead was swallowed suddenly by a thick bank of steam rushing upward from a vent. The wind direction hadn't changed. The steam had simply appeared. I heard a soft tapping behind me, like fingers drumming on wood. I turned slowly. The figure stood on the boardwalk now, far closer than any rational explanation allowed. Its body was thin, fragile-looking, but the way it stood suggested impossible strength. Like something that didn't understand weight or gravity. Its arms hung too long, the hands tapering into points rather than fingers. As the steam swirled around it, pieces of its skin flaked off and drifted in the air like mineral dust. Something wet dripped from its elbow, a single drop sizzling on the warm terrace ground. Then it mimicked me. I stepped back, it stepped forward. I raised one trembling hand, it lifted one of its elongated arms. It wasn't copying perfectly. Its timing was just slightly off, like a broken puppet learning movements for the first time. That was when I realized something horrifying. It wasn't trying to imitate me. It was trying to become me. I forced myself to move. I lunged sideways off the boardwalk and into the shallow snowbank, rolling hard to avoid slipping into the thermal runoff. The creature didn't follow immediately. Instead, it cocked its head again, observing me with that blank, featureless face, like it was studying the way my body reacted to fear. The steam around it thickened, curling upward like hands gripping its limbs. Then it began walking toward me. Not smoothly. More like it was relearning the concept of walking with every step. Its knees bent the wrong way, its hips twisted unnaturally. The cracking sound that followed each movement made my skin crawl. I scrambled down a slope of mineral deposits, ignoring the heat seeping through my boots. Behind me, the creature dropped from the boardwalk, landing with a brittle, snapping sound. But it didn't fall apart. It simply rearranged itself. From the corner of my eye, I saw its body flatten and compress briefly before rising again in a more accurate human posture. It was evolving, learning my shape in real time. As I neared the lower terraces, I tried once more to radio for backup. This time the static broke, and a voice whispered through, low, stretched, distorted. Riley. I froze. The thing wasn't just mimicking my body anymore. It had my voice. I stumbled into a cluster of thermal pools, each glowing a faint orange beneath the snow. The mist here was thicker, hotter. Every breath felt like inhaling needles. I could hear the creature behind me, dry, cracking footsteps mixed with soft, wet slaps as pieces of its mineral skin loosened and reformed. I ducked behind a boulder formed from decades of mineral buildup. For several seconds, everything went silent except the churning of hot water. Then, tapping. Slow, rhythmic. The creature was drumming its pointed hand against the rock as if signaling that it knew I was hiding. My mind raced. These terraces had countless thin sections, beautiful to look at, deadly to walk on. If that thing stepped on the wrong patch, maybe. But then I remembered how it moved, how it adapted. It learned my walking patterns in seconds. It would learn the terrain, too. I swallowed hard and forced myself out of hiding, hoping movement would give me a chance to escape. The creature responded instantly. It detached from the rock, twisting its body in a way that nearly made me vomit. Its torso uncoiled like rope unraveling. It was copying my sprint now, step for step, but grotesquely exaggerated, as if stretching a human motion into something far more predatory. I reached the service trail leading toward the mammoth housing area. If I could reach the ranger dorms, I might find someone, anyone, who could help. But halfway up the trail, the air turned unnaturally quiet. Snowflakes stopped falling. Steam halted mid-rise, hovering like frozen smoke. Time itself seemed to hesitate. I turned slowly. The creature stood at the mouth of the trail, but it looked different now. Its body had fully adjusted to a human silhouette. Same height as me, same proportions. Even the tilt of its head resembled my usual posture when I was out on patrol. But the face, God, the face was still blank. Except now there were faint impressions beneath the mineral surface. Grooves where eyes should be. Indentations forming at the mouth. It was sculpting a face. My face. The creature lifted its hands and pressed them against its smooth features, pushing inward, cracking the surface. Pieces of mineral skin broke away, revealing something darker, wetter underneath, like clay mixed with ash. A primitive, unfinished version of me stared back. Then it tried to smile. The cracking noise echoed across the frozen hillside. Panic surged through me like electricity. I bolted toward the housing area. The wooden cabins came into view, warm lights glowing through frosted windows. I screamed for help, waving frantically. Ranger Daniel stepped outside, bundled in winter gear, confusion on his face. "Riley, what the hell?" "Inside!" I shouted. "Now!" Daniel looked past me, his eyes widening. He didn't ask questions after that. We slammed the door behind us and locked it. The cabin suddenly felt too small, too fragile. Daniel grabbed his rifle while I paced, shaking uncontrollably. "What did you see?" he demanded. I tried explaining, but the words tangled together. Mineral skin, faceless shape, mimicking me. Daniel didn't believe me fully, but fear was written plain across his face. Then, footsteps. Slow, deliberate, right outside the door. Daniel raised his rifle. The footsteps stopped. Silence. Then a soft knock. 3 taps. The exact rhythm the creature used on the rock. Daniel whispered, "Riley, tell me you didn't teach someone that knock." My stomach dropped. Then a voice spoke from outside. My voice, but stretched, distorted, Wrong. Let me in. I'm cold. Daniel and I backed away as the doorknob twitched. Not turning, twitching, like something was learning how it worked. Slowly, experimentally. Is someone out there? Daniel shouted. The voice answered instantly. Riley, come outside. Daniel's face drained of color. That's your voice, he whispered. The creature pressed against the door. The wood groaned. The hinges creaked. It wasn't trying to break in. It was pushing its face against the surface, distorting it inward. A pale indentation formed, shaping into a human face. My face. It doesn't need the door, I whispered. It's doing this because it wants me to hear it. Daniel grabbed my arm. We're going out the back, now. We slipped through the rear exit and into the dark. Snow fell heavily, but the flakes evaporated when they drifted near the creature. Daniel pointed toward the maintenance garage. We ran for it. Halfway there, I felt heat behind us. Humid, metallic heat, like standing over a boiling vent. We turned. The creature was no longer at the front door. It stood in the middle of the street, its body fully matching mine now. Same build, same walk, same clothing texture sculpted from mineral and ash. Except its face was still wrong. The smile too wide, the eyes too deep. We reached the maintenance garage and barricaded ourselves inside, breath misting in the cold air. Daniel checked the back exits while I searched for tools, anything we could use as a weapon. But deep down, I knew weapons wouldn't matter. This wasn't an animal. It wasn't even alive in the way we understood it. The garage lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. A heavy silence followed. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. Then I heard a second heartbeat. Identical rhythm, perfectly synchronized with mine. It was behind the garage door. The metal began to warp inward, slowly at first, then with violent dents, as if something was pressing its forehead against it, testing, learning. Daniel aimed his rifle. If it comes through, I'm firing. Won't do anything, I whispered. Then we go down trying, he snapped. The metal peeled upward like soft clay. A pale hand emerged. Then a face, my face, dripping with mineral dust and steaming from within like hot clay. We are the Sam, it gurgled. Daniel fired. The bullet tore through the creature's head. It didn't fall. It just tilted its ruined skull and kept coming. Daniel grabbed my arm and screamed, "Run!" We made for the emergency exit, slipping into the snowstorm outside. The creature followed, but now its movements were glitching, jerking, unstable. Bullet damage had disrupted its copied form. For the first time, it wasn't confident. It was desperate. It chased us toward the lower thermal fields, wobbling like a marionette with severed strings. Steam vents hissed loudly around us. Daniel shoved me aside as the creature lunged. It missed me by inches and stumbled into a thin crust of mineral deposit. There was a split second of silence. Then the ground collapsed beneath it. The boiling water swallowed its body in a violent hiss, steam exploding upward. The creature didn't scream. It made a single sound, like a boiling pot being covered. Then nothing. When the steam cleared, only fragments of mineral skin floated in the bubbling pool. Daniel saved my life that night, but he refuses to talk about what happened. And sometimes, when snow falls just right against the steam vents, I see a shape forming inside the mist. A shape with my posture, my walk, my height. And once, only once, I swear I heard my own voice echo back from the terraces. Riley. They think the creature died in the pool. But I know better. It wasn't a body learning a shape. It was the land itself learning a person. and Yellowstone never forgets. My name is Ranger Cole Merriman, and for nearly 12 years, I was assigned to the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone, one of the most visited, most photographed, and, strangely, one of the quietest places at night. Most people see the canyon in daylight, golden cliffs glowing in sunlight, the distant roar of lower falls, the river carving through the ancient stone. But once the sun drops, that place changes. And I don't mean the temperature or the dark. I mean something else. Something that waits. This happened during late autumn, when the park was thinning out for the season. We'd received several reports from hikers claiming they saw a man standing near the edge after closing hours. Visitors wandering near the 1,000-foot drop is a rescue nightmare, so they sent me to investigate. I remember stepping out of my truck and hearing the echo of the falls. Steady, powerful, endless. But beneath that, I swore I heard something else. A faint scraping, like stone dragging on stone. The air smelled sharper near the rim, as if the cold carried something metallic in it. I followed the trail to Artist Point, sweeping my flashlight across the rocky edge. Nothing. Only shadows stretching from the pine trees behind me. Then, as I turned to head back, I noticed a fresh set of footprints leading toward the cliff. Bare footprints. Human. But there was only one set, as if the person walked straight to the edge and simply never walked back. I crouched beside the footprints, brushing my glove along the edges. They weren't distorted like someone running or slipping. They were perfectly placed, evenly spaced, like someone calmly walked barefoot across freezing ground toward a 1,000-foot drop. The prints were fresh, no frost in them, no snow crystals. Whoever made them had been here minutes ago. I stood and swept my flashlight across the canyon rim again. The beam cut through the darkness, catching the rising mist from the falls. For a second, I thought I saw the outline of a person standing on a jutting rock formation halfway down the canyon wall. A tall shape. Too tall. But when I blinked, it was gone. Maybe it was just the twisting shadows on the jagged cliffs. Still, the air felt wrong. Heavy. Pressing. Like someone was leaning over my shoulder. I kept telling myself it was just the echo of the falls messing with my senses. But the deeper I walked along that rim, the harder it became to ignore the feeling that I wasn't alone. Halfway back to the truck, the radio on my shoulder cracked sharply with static. Then a voice, thin, strained, almost stretched too far, whispered, "Cole, don't look up." My blood froze. The voice wasn't any ranger, and it wasn't coming from dispatch. It was coming from somewhere very close, distorted through my radio like a broken mimic. Instinctively, I lifted my eyes toward the ridge above me. Something moved. The motion on the ridge was subtle. Just a shift of darkness against slightly lighter darkness. I angled my flashlight upward, but the beam couldn't reach the top. It merely died against the jagged silhouette of the cliff. The ridge was nearly 80 feet above the trail. No one should be up there. The terrain was too steep, too unstable, too dangerous. The radio crackled again, this time with a low, broken breathing pattern. Not human breathing. Slower, wet, uneven. I grabbed the radio, trying to shut it off, but the static exploded so violently that I flinched. Through the static came the same stretched, whispering voice. "Don't be here." I backed up, keeping the flashlight angled toward the ridge. A faint scrape of stone slid down the slope. Then another, like something heavy dragging itself closer to the edge. I called out, "This is Ranger Merriman. If someone's up there, call back. You're in a restricted area." No reply. Just another scrape. Louder this time. followed by a single, sharp sound. A rock tumbling down and stopping inches from my boot. Whatever was up there, it wasn't trying to hide anymore. I slowly reached for my flare gun, not to fire it, just to have it ready. But as soon as my hand touched it, something on the ridge moved again. This time, it stood up, and it was tall. Too tall for any person. The figure straightened slowly, unnaturally slow, like joints bending in ways they weren't meant to. I could barely see it, only a long-limbed outline framed against the night sky. No face, no detail. Just height and wrongness. I stepped back instinctively, but the figure mirrored the movement, leaning forward as if peering down at me. My breath fogged the air. The thing's breath did not. A gust of wind blew through the canyon, carrying the waterfall's roar deeper and hollowing it into something that almost sounded like a voice. Every instinct screamed at me to get back to the truck, but I forced myself to stay still. Running might provoke it. "Identify yourself," I shouted. The figure's head twitched sharply, like it had never heard a human voice before. Then, it crouched. A predator's crouch. Preparing. My heart slammed against my ribs. Suddenly the ridge echoed with a cracking sound, like bones snapping or stone breaking. Then the silhouette vanished, dropped straight out of sight. I whipped my flashlight across the rock wall, searching for movement. Nothing. No impact sound. No sliding debris, just emptiness. I took one careful step backward. Then I heard it again. Breathing, not above me anymore. Below. Directly below, in the canyon. And it was getting louder. The breathing rising from the canyon sounded impossibly close, as if the source was climbing straight up the vertical wall. But that made no sense. That cliff was sheer, smooth in places, crumbling in others. No human or animal could scale it. Yet the breathing kept climbing, louder, wet, rhythmic, dragging itself upward. I aimed my flashlight down into the canyon, but the beam only illuminated swirling mist. The sound paused. Then, a pale hand shot into the light, long skeletal fingers, joints bending both ways, nails cracked and thick like stone. It latched onto the rock edge just a few feet from my boots. I stumbled back, slipping in the frost. The hand tightened its grip, pulling more of the figure upward. First the forearm, way too long. Then the shoulder. Then part of a face emerging from the shadows. But not fully. As if the fog clung to it deliberately, refusing to reveal what it really looked like. Its mouth was a thin, horizontal slit, and it was smiling. Not with lips, but with the skin stretching upward. The voice on the radio whispered again, but this time it wasn't distorted. It was perfectly clear. And it was my own voice. "Don't run, Cole. It likes when you run." My stomach turned to ice. That's when the thing pulled itself fully onto the rim. It rose to its full height, easily 8 feet, maybe more. Its limbs were stretched, thin but impossibly strong, knotting under the skin like thick cords. The face remained half hidden in fog, but what little I could see didn't belong to anything natural. It had no eyes. Just shallow depressions where eyes should have been. And yet I felt unmistakably stared at. The thing tilted its head, mimicking a gesture I'd made earlier. Studying me. It took one step forward. The ground vibrated. I drew my flare gun, hands shaking uncontrollably. "Stay back." My voice cracked embarrassingly. The creature's skin twitched, as if it was tasting the sound. Then its chest expanded with a slow inhale, and it exhaled a low, vibrating sound, a warped echo of my own voice shouting the same words back at me. "Stay. Back." That broke my nerve. I fired the flare. The burst of red light lit the canyon like a hellish sunrise. The creature jerked violently, recoiling, not in pain, but in confusion, like it wasn't used to light. It stumbled backward, limbs contorting awkwardly, then dropped into the canyon in a blur of motion. I ran. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe. Every rustle behind me felt like claws brushing my neck. The trail stretched endlessly ahead, the truck feeling miles away. But halfway to the parking lot, I heard something land behind me. Something big, and too soft to be a rock. I didn't turn around. I couldn't. My body rejected the very idea. Instead, I focused on the crunch of my boots, the whipping wind, the frost-white air pumping from my lungs. The parking lot was close. I could see my truck through the thinning trees. But the footsteps behind me didn't fade. They matched my pace, then slowed, then quickened, as if the thing was experimenting. The radio on my shoulder flickered again. A different voice this time, a voice I recognized instantly. Lana, my fiancée. She'd died in a climbing accident 3 years earlier. Cole, her voice whispered, trembling with pain, exactly like the last time I heard her alive. Help me. I froze mid-stride. That voice was burned into me. No creature could know it. No creature should know it. Slowly, shaking uncontrollably, I turned my head toward the sound. At first, I saw only darkness between the pines. Then 2 long arms emerged from behind a tree, fingers wrapped around the bark. The creature's body slid into view. Its shape was wrong, twisted, bending around the trunk like liquid shadow. And when it opened its mouth, Lana's voice poured out of it. Cole, please. Something inside me broke. Not fear, not pain, rage. You're not her, I whispered. The creature smiled wider. I raised the flare gun again, but this time the creature didn't flinch. Instead, it stepped into the moonlight, revealing more of its body. Stretched skin, veins like roots, joints bending in unnatural directions. Its smile widened impossibly, splitting the skin near its cheeks. Yet the voice remained Lana's. Soft, breaking, haunting. Why, didn't you save me? My throat closed. The question cut deep. It knew exactly what memory to strike. The thing took one slow step toward me. I stepped back, the frozen ground crunching under my boot. Then it said something that stopped my heart. Don't look down. That was the last thing Lana ever said before she fell. I fired the flare directly at its chest. This time the creature screamed, a horrible screeching moan that didn't sound like pain, but outrage. The light tore through its form, shredding the fog around it. It collapsed backward, limbs folding like broken branches. I didn't stay to see if it recovered. I sprinted to the truck, fumbling for the keys. The forest behind me exploded with movement. Branches snapping, rocks clattering, breath heaving. I managed to start the engine just as the creature burst from the tree line, its long arms slamming onto the hood, denting the metal. The creature's mouth opened wide. And it spoke, in my voice this time. It clung to the hood, its long fingers digging through the metal like wet clay. My engine roared, and the headlights lit its face. Part human, part nothing human at all. The skin stretched thinly across bone, the mouth hanging open too wide, and my own voice echoed from its throat. Don't leave me, Cole. The mimicry was flawless, terrifying. I slammed the truck into reverse, tires skidding across ice. The creature slid off the hood but clung to the bumper, dragging its body across the pavement with unnatural speed. Sparks flew from its claws. I floored the gas. The truck fish-tailed, throwing the thing into the snowbank. I spun the wheel, barreled down the service road, and didn't slow down until I hit the main park access route. My entire body was shaking so violently I could barely grip the steering wheel. For a moment, everything was silent. Then a figure stepped into the headlights. Tall, wrong, waiting. I swerved off-road, plowing through brush until I reached the ranger station. I slammed the door behind me, locked it, barricaded it with a desk, and collapsed to the floor. The radio crackled one last time. A whisper, almost gentle. You can't run from something that already knows your voice. Something tapped the window. Slow, deliberate. I didn't look. I spent the rest of the night pressed against the wall of the station, flare gun in hand, listening as the thing circled the cabin. Sometimes its footsteps were loud and heavy. Other times silent, followed only by faint breathing against the glass. It never tried to break in. It didn't need to. It wanted me awake. Listening. Just before dawn, everything stopped. No breathing, no footsteps, no whispers. I waited hours before stepping outside. There were no tracks around the cabin, no claw marks, no drag marks. Like nothing had ever been there at all. I filed an incident report, but it was buried in the psychological fatigue category. No one believed I saw anything. No one believed the radio recordings either. They claimed interference, distortion. I know what I heard. I transferred out of Yellowstone 2 weeks later. But sometimes, late at night, when everything is still, I hear tapping on my window. Soft, familiar. And I hear a voice, sometimes mine, sometimes Lana's, whispering through the glass. Don't look down. I don't know what that thing was. A mimic, a watcher, something ancient born from the canyon itself. But I do know one thing. It followed me home. My name is Ranger Emily Harper, and I was assigned to Yellowstone's backcountry in the summer of 2018. I loved the isolation, the way the forest seemed to breathe around me. But that love turned into dread the moment I heard about the phantom camper. The story wasn't folklore. It was a real pattern. Tents pitched in secluded areas, supplies neatly arranged, and then gone, without a trace of the camper. One evening, I was patrolling near Shoshone Lake, checking on a group of hikers who had set up camp. The mist hung low over the water, and the smell of pine mixed with wet earth filled the air. Everything seemed normal until I noticed a small, flickering light across the trees. A campfire. But the official ranger map showed no authorized campsites there. Curiosity nudged me forward. The closer I got, the more I noticed things that didn't add up. The fire was perfectly circular, logs stacked in an almost ritualistic order. Yet there was no smoke. No footprints led to it, and the ground was unnaturally smooth, as if someone had walked without disturbing a single branch. Then I heard it. The faint strumming of a guitar. The tune was off-key, yet hauntingly familiar. It stopped abruptly. Silence. Then, a whisper. I see you, Emily. I froze. My heart slammed. Whoever or whatever was out there knew my name. I cautiously approached, keeping my flashlight low to avoid startling whoever was there. The campfire logs glowed faintly, but no one appeared. The guitar, or whatever had made that sound, was silent. My instincts screamed to leave, yet my curiosity anchored me in place. As I stepped closer, I noticed something truly unsettling. The footprints. Tiny, child-sized, perfectly spaced in a pattern that made no sense. They led away from the fire, but vanished halfway to the water. No mud, no crushed pine needles, nothing. Just a smooth, undisturbed forest floor. I called out softly, "Hello? Anyone there?" The response was immediate. A whisper carried on the wind. "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't loud, yet it cut through the silence like a knife. My flashlight flickered, and for a moment, I swore I saw a figure standing on the far side of the lake, illuminated by moonlight, wearing the exact same ranger uniform as mine. No features, just a silhouette. I raised my radio to report the situation, but static was all I got. Then a soft, wet splash echoed from the water. Something had entered the lake, moving closer. My stomach churned. I wanted to retreat, but my feet refused. Something was drawing me forward, an invisible force tugging at the edge of my mind. And then I felt it. A gaze, cold, intelligent, watching from across the misty water. The mist over the lake thickened, curling around my boots as if trying to anchor me in place. I forced myself to step forward, flashlight slicing through the fog. The air was heavy, almost metallic. Every instinct screamed that I was being watched. And I was. I noticed a second fire now, smaller to the side. No logs, no smoke, just a faint orange glow hovering above the ground. The guitar strummed again, soft this time, off-key, almost mournful. I could hear breathing, but it wasn't human. Deep, wet, resonant. Suddenly, the shadow of the figure on the far shore shifted. It raised a hand, or what I thought was a hand. The mist seemed to ripple around it, obscuring any clear shape. Then the whisper came again. "Why are you here?" I swallowed hard and stepped closer. And that's when the ground beneath me moved. Not like an animal stepping. It was subtle, deliberate. The frost and leaves lifted in a wave, a pressure moving across the soil toward me. But I saw no source. My radio crackled violently, and amidst the static, I distinctly heard my own voice, trembling. "Get out. Now." I froze. The figure had taken one step closer, and yet I could see no features, just the outline of someone who should be there, mimicking my form, my uniform. Then, as if realizing I could see it, it vanished entirely, just like that, into the fog. I forced myself to move, edging along the lake shore, eyes darting to every dark shape in the fog. The guitar stopped abruptly, leaving only the faint sound of water lapping at the rocks. My radio buzzed again, static layering with a whisper that was almost unintelligible. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was pleading, urgent, familiar. Then I noticed the tents, not the campers I'd come to check on, but smaller, perfectly pitched tents that hadn't been there before. Canvas smooth, poles perfectly straight, no footprints leading to them. The smell of damp earth mingled with the faintest hint of wood smoke. One of the tents moved, slowly, deliberately. A flap lifted just a fraction, and I thought I saw a small, pale face staring back. Not a child I recognized, not any camper. But the eyes, hollow, dark, endless. I called out, "Hello, are you okay?" No response. Only the whisper again, now a chorus. "You shouldn't be here. Leave." I approached the tent, stepping cautiously. Inside was nothing. No camper, no belongings, just a faint imprint of a body in the dirt. Before I could react, the guitar strummed again, louder. The note reverberated unnaturally, echoing across the lake. And for the first time, I felt it. Presence, solid, standing right behind me. I spun around, flashlight trembling in my hands. But the space behind me was empty. Yet the sense of being watched pressed on me, like cold fingers brushing my spine. My breath was loud, too loud, and the faint guitar strumming resumed, floating across the lake with a melody that made my stomach churn. Then I saw footprints, tiny, child-sized, but impossibly long. They weaved in circles around the tents and disappeared into the fog without a single displaced leaf or twig. Whoever, or whatever, made them didn't follow the rules of the natural world. I backed away slowly, trying to maintain distance. That's when I noticed movement at the water's edge. A pale figure crouched, watching me, its head tilted unnaturally, following my every step. It was naked, but the skin looked wrong. Too smooth, too reflective, almost like wet porcelain. My heart slammed. I could feel the tension in the air like static before a storm. I raised my radio, ready to call for backup, but the static transformed into a distorted chorus of voices. Campers, rangers, even mine, screaming, whispering, pleading. A sudden flash of movement at the far edge of the forest drew my gaze. Another figure, taller, darker, looming over the trees like a predator. I realized, with growing horror, that the phantom camper wasn't alone. And they weren't playing. I ran. My boots splashed through shallow water, slipping on slick rocks. The mist wrapped around me, hiding the phantom camper but amplifying every sound. Guitar strings plucked in dissonance, whispers echoing my own name, soft splashes following my every step. The tents vanished behind me. No trace remained, no footprints, no fire. Nothing. It was as if they had never existed, except in my mind, except for the heavy, unnatural feeling of being hunted. I reached a small clearing and stopped to catch my breath. My flashlight flickered. And then I saw it. The first figure, standing still on the far bank, watching, waiting. Its head cocked at an impossible angle. I tried calling on the radio again, but this time I heard something else. Footsteps approaching me from behind, not in the leaves or mud, but from the air itself, silent and soft. My stomach dropped. I dared to glance back. Nothing. Yet the sense of presence was undeniable. Closer. Too close. The air felt thick with anticipation, like the forest itself was holding its breath. And then I realized, every time I blinked, the figures weren't in the same place. They moved with me, appearing and disappearing, mocking me, predicting my steps. Panic surged. I knew I had to escape. But the exit wasn't what I thought. I stumbled into a narrow ravine, hoping it would give me cover. But the fog clung to every surface like a living thing. My flashlight cut through the murk, revealing nothing but slick rocks and twisted tree roots. Yet the whispers followed me, carried on a wind that had no origin. My own name repeated over and over. Emily. Emily. Don't look, don't move. Then I saw it. One of the small tents had appeared at the top of the ravine, perfectly pitched on a ledge that shouldn't support it. A shadow moved inside. I froze. It was a figure small and hunched, yet its head lifted unnaturally, turning to face me. Suddenly, the tall, dark silhouette I had glimpsed earlier emerged behind the small figure. Its limbs were impossibly long, bending in ways that shouldn't exist. It didn't move like a human. It slid, gliding silently toward me. My heart pounded, adrenaline igniting every muscle. I raised my flare gun and fired into the mist. The light exploded across the ravine, illuminating both figures for just a moment. The small one vanished. The tall one recoiled, then began to mimic my exact movements, as if anticipating my next step. My breath caught. I realized, with horror, that the phantom camper wasn't just a ghost. It was something that copied me, learned me, predicted me, and it had me trapped. I backed up, slipping on the wet rocks. Every instinct screamed at me to run, yet my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. The tall figure's movements were eerily fluid, following me step for step without leaving a single mark. It wasn't running, walking, or gliding. It simply existed in every shadow simultaneously. The whispers grew louder, forming words now. "You belong. You belong." I realized it was imitating the voice of every lost camper I had ever heard about, the phantom camper's victims. The thought made my stomach turn. Suddenly, a hand touched my shoulder. Cold, solid, human, or almost human. I spun around. No one was there. My own reflection in the dark water looked wrong, slightly elongated, distorted, like the figure had pressed itself into my own shadow. I tried running again. The ravine twisted unnaturally, the paths I thought I knew warping in impossible directions. Trees shifted slightly when I wasn't looking. Rocks moved underfoot. The phantom camper wasn't just in the forest. It was the forest. My flashlight flickered, then died. Darkness consumed me. I could hear my own heartbeat, amplified 1,000 times. And then, from all around, the whispers spoke together. "You're ours. Forever." Panic turned to instinct. I bolted blindly, falling over roots, splashing into puddles, until I saw a light. My truck. My only hope. I reached the edge of the ravine and stumbled into the clearing where my truck should have been. It was there. Headlights off, doors locked. Relief surged through me for a brief second before I noticed the footprints surrounding it. Tiny, circular, impossible in size, perfectly spaced around the tires as if mocking me. I ran to the driver's side and yanked the door open. As I fumbled for the keys, the fog parted and I saw them. Figures surrounding the clearing now, dozens of shadowy humanoids with hollow faces. They didn't move toward me, not yet. They just watched. Their whispers formed a chorus, repeating names of everyone I had ever loved. My own name came last, stretching across the trees. Emily Harper. I slammed the door, turned the key, and the engine roared to life. The lights cut through the fog. The figures froze. One of the small tents appeared at the edge of the clearing, just for a second, then vanished. I drove slowly at first, scanning the tree line. The whispers followed me, muffled now by the engine. I dared a glance into the rearview mirror. The forest looked normal, undisturbed. No figures, no tents, no footprints. But in the distance, across the lake, the faint glow of another campfire flickered. And I knew, with icy certainty, the phantom camper had not let me go. I drove out of the back country as fast as I could, the forest pressing close on all sides. Every now and then, the fog thickened, and I swore I saw figures at the edge of my headlights, standing still, then gone when I blinked. When I reached the ranger station, dawn was breaking. I reported what I saw, but, as always, no one believed me. The maps, the previous reports, everything suggested nothing had happened. Yet I could still hear it. The faint strumming of a guitar, soft, haunting, following me in my mind. Weeks later, I received a note at the station. No sender. Just a sketch of a small tent in the fog and a single line. "We'll see you next summer, Emily." I never went back. I transferred to another park far away, but sometimes, at night, I think about Shoshone Lake, about the campers who disappeared, about the figures that mimic, watch, and wait. And sometimes, when the wind carries just right, I hear the guitar again. Somewhere out there, the phantom camper is still waiting, and it knows my name. My name is Ranger Jason Miller, and I've been patrolling Yellowstone's backcountry for nearly a decade. I thought I had seen everything the park could throw at me. Grizzly encounters, rogue elk, sudden snowstorms. But nothing prepared me for the night I heard the howling in Lamar Valley. It was late June, just past midnight. I was checking on a remote wildlife camera when I noticed an eerie stillness settling over the valley. Even the wind had died down. Then it started. A low, guttural howl, unlike any animal I'd ever heard. Deep, resonant, almost human, but layered with something primal and inhuman. At first, I assumed it was a coyote or wolf, but the pitch and timing were wrong. There was a rhythm, deliberate, as if someone, or something, was announcing its presence. The hairs on my arms stood on end. Every ranger knows the backcountry has its secrets, but this was different. I grabbed my flashlight and radio, trying to triangulate the source. The howl stopped. Silence. Then it started again, this time from a different direction. The valley felt alive, breathing, pulsing with anticipation. A strange feeling washed over me. I wasn't just an observer, I was being drawn in. Something wanted me to follow. And I had no idea if I'd come back. I followed the sound, moving cautiously along a narrow trail. The ground was damp, the scent of pine and earth heavy in the still night air. Each howl echoed from multiple directions, yet no physical source appeared. My flashlight's beam swept across the valley, illuminating nothing but rocks, trees, and patches of fog. Then I saw movement, a flash of something pale and humanoid near a boulder. I froze. My instinct screamed to run, but curiosity rooted me to the spot. The thing didn't run, didn't walk. It glided, almost like it was hovering above the ground. Its form was partially obscured by fog, yet I could see its limbs were twisted, elongated, not natural. The howling stopped. Absolute silence, except for my own ragged breathing. Then, from behind, a whisper. "You shouldn't be here, Jason." I spun around, flashlight cutting through the mist. Nothing. Yet I could feel it. Watching, circling, learning me. The hairs on the back of my neck stood straight. I realized I was completely alone. Or at least, that's what I wanted to believe. Suddenly, the ground beneath me shifted. Not like an animal moving, more like the earth itself was pulsing. Every step I took seemed mirrored by the valley. And then the howl returned. Louder, closer, impossibly near. I followed the howling deeper into the valley, my flashlight slicing through the thick fog. The rhythm of the sounds felt deliberate, almost like a language I couldn't comprehend. Every now and then, I thought I caught a glimpse of pale, humanoid shapes slipping between the trees just at the edge of my vision. My radio buzzed unexpectedly. Static at first, then a whisper, distorted, repeating my name. "Jason. Jason." I froze. I was the only one in this sector. The valley was supposed to be empty at this hour. Yet something, or someone, was tracking me. I stumbled across a shallow creek, the water reflecting moonlight. And then I saw footprints. Large, uneven, not human, but also not like any animal I'd tracked before. They weaved in unnatural patterns, leading toward the source of the howls. I felt compelled to follow them. My instinct screamed at me to turn back, but something stronger, deeper, drove me forward. Then suddenly, the howling stopped. Complete silence. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. And in that silence, I realized I was not alone. Something was standing in the mist, completely still. Its glowing eyes, faintly amber, pierced the fog, staring straight at me. I froze, flashlight trembling in my hands. The figure didn't move, yet I could feel it studying me, calculating. The hairs on my neck stood straight as a chill ran through my spine. My mind raced. Was it intelligent? Was it hunting me? Then the howling returned, louder, but different. Layered, distorted, echoing from multiple directions at once. It wasn't just sound, it was intent, threat, warning. I tried to back away slowly, but the mist seemed to close in, thickening around me, restricting my movements. Shadows shifted unnaturally in every direction. The figure remained, unmoving, yet its presence pressed against my chest. Then I saw more of them. Pale shapes, dozens, gliding silently between the trees. Each one followed its own pattern, circling me, whispering my name. My heart raced. My rational mind told me to leave, but my body felt frozen, caught in some unseen web. Suddenly, a howl erupted directly behind me, deafening, bone-chilling. I spun around, but there was nothing, just fog. Yet the feeling of being hunted intensified. I realized the howling wasn't coming from the valley. It was coming from inside me, inside my mind. And I knew, without a doubt, the phantom howlers wanted me. I tried to run, but my legs felt like lead. Every step I took seemed mirrored by the fog itself. The figures remained at the edge of my vision, gliding with unnatural precision. My flashlight flickered violently, revealing glimpses of twisted limbs, elongated faces, and mouths that seemed to form words I couldn't comprehend. I stumbled into a clearing, thinking I could see the valley's exit. But it wasn't an exit. The fog twisted the landscape, making familiar paths vanish. I was trapped in a shifting maze. The howls intensified, now overlapping in a symphony of terror. Then I heard it. A single, human-like voice, soft but commanding. "You can't leave." My stomach dropped. The sound wasn't coming from the figures, it was coming from the valley itself. Suddenly, one figure emerged from the mist, closer this time. Its glowing amber eyes locked onto mine. I could see it perfectly now. Limbs elongated, skin pale and smooth, movements fluid and unnatural. It tilted its head, as if mocking me. Every instinct screamed to flee, but there was nowhere to go. I realized I was surrounded, trapped by beings that weren't entirely human, guided by some dark intelligence. The howling reached a crescendo, vibrating through the earth and into my bones. I closed my eyes, praying for dawn, but knew it might not come. I crouched behind a fallen log, trying to make myself invisible. The figures moved silently, circling, whispering, howling. I could feel their intent pressing into me, like invisible hands clutching my chest. Each breath I took was labored, my heart hammering. One figure stepped into the clearing, its body shifting unnaturally, almost like smoke. Its gaze met mine. I swear it smiled, or at least the closest thing to a smile existed on that alien face. The air itself grew cold, icy fingers wrapping around me. I remembered my flare gun. My hands shook as I fired it into the fog. The sudden blaze illuminated the valley for a fleeting moment. The figures recoiled, yet I could see more of them emerging from the darkness, drawn to the light like moths to a flame. Then, silence. Absolute. The flare burned out. The fog thickened again. I was alone, or at least I thought I was. Then a wet scraping sound came from behind me. Something large had followed my every movement, perfectly silent until it chose to announce itself. I had no choice but to move forward, deeper into the valley, praying I would stumble upon something familiar, a path, a road, anything, but the valley had no intention of letting me leave. And I stumbled into another clearing, and there it was, a cabin I didn't recognize, small, weathered, seemingly abandoned. A dim light glowed inside. Desperation made me run toward it. Maybe someone else was here. Maybe I wasn't alone. I reached the door, hand trembling, and peeked inside. The cabin was empty, but the air was thick, oppressive. The howling had stopped, replaced by a low, guttural growl emanating from somewhere within. The walls seemed to pulse, alive with movement, shifting shadows, stretching unnaturally. Then I felt it, a hand, icy and skeletal, brush against my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing. My mind was screaming. Yet I could see faint footprints inside the cabin, tiny, uneven, and disappearing into the walls themselves. I realized then the figures weren't bound by the normal rules of space or time. They existed in layers of reality I could barely perceive, slipping in and out, always watching. A whisper cut through the silence. "You cannot leave, Jason. We will find you." I ran from the cabin into the fog, my senses overwhelmed. The valley had become a labyrinth, twisting impossibly. I could hear the howling again, surrounding me, echoing in my mind. I was not just hunted. I was being toyed with. And I was terrified that dawn might never come. I stumbled through knee-deep mist, every step disoriented by the valley's shifting landscape. The figures glided silently among the trees, appearing closer with every heartbeat. The howling became a cacophony of voices, repeating names of all the lost campers I'd ever read about, warning me, taunting me, claiming me. I thought I saw the exit, a road faintly illuminated by moonlight. But when I reached it, it vanished, replaced by more fog, more shifting trees, more impossibly tall figures standing silently, watching. My mind teetered on the edge of madness. One figure appeared directly in front of me, closer than I dared imagine. Its head tilted unnaturally, limbs elongated, skin pale and smooth. It mimicked my movements, mocking me. I threw my flashlight at it, but it passed through the figure like a shadow through water. I ran blindly. The mist parted for the faintest glimpse of daylight ahead. I sprinted toward it, ignoring branches that tore at my clothes, ignoring the scraping sounds that followed my every step. When I finally broke through the fog and reached familiar territory, the figures didn't follow. But the valley's whispers lingered in my mind, haunting me long after I had left. I knew the howling hadn't ended. It would wait, and it would return. I reached the main ranger station just as dawn broke. Exhausted, covered in mud and scratches, I reported everything. My colleagues listened politely, jotting notes, but I could see the doubt in their eyes. The valley was supposed to be empty. The cameras showed nothing, no signs of the figures. Yet I could feel them. Even here, miles away, the howling echoed faintly in my mind. The images of pale, elongated humanoids and glowing amber eyes haunted every corner of my thoughts. Every shadow in the station seemed to shift unnaturally, just out of my peripheral vision. Weeks later, I received a strange message on my work email. No sender. Just an image. My own ranger badge, illuminated by amber eyes, overlaid with the words, "We are still here." I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every creak in the station, every gust of wind outside reminded me of the valley, of the howling, and of the figures that had learned me, hunted me, and were waiting for my return. I knew, deep down, that I would never truly be free of Lamar Valley. Years later, I sometimes drive through Lamar Valley on routine patrols, careful to avoid the deeper backcountry. But sometimes, when the wind is still and the mist curls low over the ground, I hear it again, the low, guttural howl. Layered, deliberate, intelligent. I stop and listen, heart hammering, knowing what I will see if I dare to follow. Shadows shift just at the edge of perception, figures emerging, gliding, observing. The phantom howlers are still out there, learning, waiting, and calling my name. I don't chase the howling anymore. I just wait. For dawn, for safety, for the knowledge that I am far enough away. But the valley never forgets. It keeps a record in whispers and shadows, in elongated shapes that slip between the trees. And I know, with chilling certainty, that one day, if I am careless, it will call me back. Somewhere in Lamar Valley, they are still watching, still howling, and they will never stop. My name is Ranger Lisa Thompson, and I've patrolled Yellowstone for 7 years. I've seen wildlife maulings, hypothermia cases, and even one bizarre bear attack that defied explanation. But nothing scared me like what happened near Old Faithful that summer. It was past midnight, and I was doing a routine security check. The boardwalks were empty, and the geysers' predictable eruptions had stopped, replaced by a strange, eerie silence. The steam from the hot spring twisted unnaturally in the moonlight, forming shapes that seemed almost sentient. That's when I noticed it. A tall, shadowy figure at the edge of the geyser basin. It wasn't moving like a human. It glided, smooth and unnatural, without disturbing the steam or leaving footprints on the boardwalk. Its presence sent a cold wave through my body, a feeling of being watched by something older, wiser, and malevolent. I tried to radio in my location, but the signal cut out. The shadows shifted slightly, just enough for me to see elongated limbs and a featureless face. Panic rose in my chest, but a strange curiosity kept me rooted. Then it vanished. 1 second it was there, the next, nothing. Yet I knew it hadn't gone. I could feel it, waiting, watching. And I realized, with a chill I will never forget, Old Faithful was no longer predictable, because it had a guardian. I edged closer to the geyser, flashlight in hand, my pulse racing. The shadow didn't move, yet every instinct screamed it was aware of me. The boardwalk creaked under my boots, but somehow the figure didn't react, until I shined my light directly at it. In that instant, the shadow recoiled unnaturally, as if the light burned it, yet it didn't disappear. Its form flickered like smoke in a sudden wind, before returning to solid, towering darkness. The steam around the geysers swirled violently, forming shapes that resembled faces, screaming silently into the night. I whispered into my radio again, hoping for a response. Only static answered. I felt utterly alone, and yet suffocated by the presence of something that should not exist in the human world. Then I heard a low, almost musical hum coming from the geyser itself. The sound was mesmerizing, hypnotic, pulling at the edges of my mind. I realized I was leaning forward, unable to resist. Suddenly, a shadow darted across my peripheral vision, faster than I could comprehend. My heart leapt. I spun, but the boardwalk was empty. Only the hum remained, vibrating in my chest, reminding me that I was not in control. And then I felt it. A cold, finger-like touch brush against my shoulder. I spun around, searching for the source of the cold touch. But the boardwalk was empty. The hum continued, pulsating like a heartbeat, resonating through my chest. My flashlight flickered, illuminating steam that twisted into unnatural shapes. I could see what looked like shadowy faces, mouths opening and closing in silent screams. The shadow reappeared across the boardwalk, closer than before. Its limbs were unnaturally long, bending in ways that defied human anatomy. I realized it wasn't just a shadow. It was alive, sentient, aware of every movement I made. My mind raced to rationalize, but no explanation fit. I tried to back away slowly, but the boardwalk seemed to stretch endlessly, the edges of reality warping. Every step I took was mirrored by a darkness in my peripheral vision. Then I heard a whisper. Not human, not animal. Just a sound that felt like ice against my brain. Stay. I froze, paralyzed by fear. The shadow tilted its head, observing me, and then darted across the boardwalk with impossible speed. It paused only inches from me before vanishing into the steam, leaving a cold void in its wake. I realized I was trapped in a game I didn't understand. And the shadow wasn't just watching. It was choosing how this game would unfold. I took a deep breath and tried to steady myself. Rational thought told me to leave immediately, but my curiosity, fueled by fear, pushed me forward. The shadow had chosen this moment, and I couldn't turn back yet. The boardwalk twisted ahead, familiar landmarks distorted by steam and darkness. The hum intensified, vibrating through the wood beneath my boots. I could feel it under my feet, as if the geyser itself was alive, resonating with the shadow's presence. Suddenly, the figure appeared directly in front of me, blocking the path. I raised my flashlight, the beam cutting through the thick mist. Its featureless face reflected the light in a strange, almost metallic shimmer. It moved in jerky, unnatural increments, yet each step seemed perfectly calculated. A cold breeze swept through the boardwalk, carrying with it whispers that I couldn't decipher. Names, perhaps, or threats. My stomach turned. I realized the shadow wasn't just aware of me. It was communicating, warning me, or taunting me. Then it vanished again, leaving a dark residue in the air, like smoke that lingered longer than it should. I pressed forward cautiously, every nerve screaming, knowing the shadow was still there, just beyond sight, ready to strike again. The hum suddenly stopped. Silence fell, oppressive and unnatural. I stopped in place, straining to hear. My own breathing seemed loud, intrusive. The boardwalk ahead appeared warped, longer than it should be, leading to areas I knew didn't exist. I moved forward slowly, every instinct alert. The shadow emerged again, closer than ever, and this time it wasn't alone. Smaller shapes flickered at the edges of my vision, pale, human-like forms, but distorted like wax melting under heat. They didn't approach immediately. Instead, they glided, circling me, creating a sense of inescapable dread. I felt my pulse hammering, my mind fraying. The air was thick, charged with something I couldn't see but could feel. Malevolence. Then the hum returned, louder, resonant, almost musical. I realized it was emanating not from the geyser, but from the shadow itself. The sound penetrated my skull, twisting thoughts, invoking panic and a strange, irresistible curiosity. I tried to run. My boots slipped on the wet boardwalk, and the shadow moved in perfect synchronization with me, anticipating every movement. I had never felt so hunted, so powerless, and yet so aware that something ancient and malevolent was studying me. I stumbled over a broken plank and fell to my knees. The shadows paused, their amber-like glows flickering in unison, almost in a rhythm. I crawled forward, trying to avoid their gaze. Every movement felt like it was being monitored, calculated. A sudden movement at the edge of the boardwalk caught my eye. A humanoid figure emerging from the geyser's steam, taller than any human, with elongated limbs and a head that tilted unnaturally. Its presence radiated cold, a void that seemed to suck the warmth from the air around me. I grabbed my radio, desperate to call for help. Static filled the earpiece, then a distorted whisper repeated my name. "Lisa, you shouldn't be here." My stomach churned. The shadow wasn't just following me, it knew me. I scrambled to my feet and ran, slipping on wet planks. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, vibrating through my bones. The shadows moved with me, gliding silently yet impossibly fast, cutting off potential escape paths. I could see the first light of dawn in the distance, a faint glow promising safety. But the shadow was between me and that light, unyielding. And I realized, with a terror that froze me, that it wasn't going to let me leave. Not yet. Desperation pushed me forward. I leapt over a broken section of boardwalk, splashing into shallow water near the geyser basin. The shadows followed effortlessly, gliding above the surface, their movements smooth and unnatural. My lungs burned, my vision blurred. Suddenly, one shadow lunged toward me, not physically, but as if it could reach into my mind. I staggered, nearly falling, feeling my thoughts twist under its unseen influence. The hum grew chaotic, a symphony of impossible frequencies that made my ears ache. Then, something unexpected happened. The shadows hesitated. A figure emerged from the geyser itself, taller than the others, more defined, with limbs bending in impossible angles. It seemed to command the smaller shapes, moving in a rhythm I couldn't comprehend. I realized this was no mere entity. It was intelligent, ancient, and malevolent. And I was trespassing in its domain. I ran blindly, barely noticing the fissures in the boardwalk or the hot steam rising from geyser vents. Every instinct screamed to survive, yet the shadows anticipated me at every turn. And then, at the edge of the mist, I glimpsed an opening, a path that might lead out. But I knew leaving would not end this. They would follow, eventually. I stumbled onto familiar terrain, the boardwalk leading toward the parking lot. Relief surged briefly until I realized something. The shadows were gone, but the hum lingered. It wasn't behind me, it was inside me, echoing in my skull, vibrating with every heartbeat. I glanced back. Moonlight caught the faintest shimmer of a figure at the boardwalk's edge. It didn't move, didn't need to. Its presence alone was enough to remind me I wasn't free. I kept moving, trying to convince myself that dawn would bring safety. The shadows had not followed, at least not visibly, but the valley itself felt alive, watching, judging, waiting. When I reached my truck, I jumped inside, locked the doors, and tried to collect my thoughts. The hum was gone, but every instinct in my body told me it hadn't disappeared. It had merely withdrawn. For now, I didn't sleep that night. Every creak, every whisper of wind reminded me of Old Faithful. I realized this place, sacred and beautiful, was also home to something incomprehensible, something older than humanity, and it was still there, watching. Weeks later, reports came in from tourists. Strange shadows at night, whispers caught on audio recordings, inexplicable chills near the geyser. No one believed the details, but I could see it in their eyes. Fear and confusion. I revisited Old Faithful during the day. The boardwalk looked ordinary, the geyser erupting predictably, tourists milling around, oblivious. Yet, I knew better. Somewhere beneath that familiar landscape, the shadow waited. It learned. It observed. At night, I could still hear the hum in my mind, faint, almost a memory, warning me that the valley's guardians had not forgotten me. The encounter had marked me. I would always be aware, always vigilant. The shadows weren't just entities. They were a presence intertwined with Yellowstone itself, something that existed beyond comprehension, yet real enough to terrorize anyone who strayed too far into their domain. And I knew, deep down, that if I ever returned alone at night, they would be waiting. Even now, years later, I drive past Old Faithful during patrols, careful to stay on daylight hours. But sometimes, when the wind is still and the steam rises lazily, I hear the faint hum in the distance, a vibration in my chest, a whisper in my mind. I don't approach anymore. I've learned that the shadows are patient, ancient, and intelligent. They don't need to chase, they wait, they observe, and if I ever underestimate them, they will remind me of their power. The valley seems peaceful to the untrained eye, predictable and beautiful. But I know the truth. Beneath its surface, the shadow waits. A guardian older than memory, bending space, watching, and marking anyone who dares step too close after dark. Old Faithful has a secret, a dark, intelligent secret. And the hum, the whispers, the elongated forms, they are eternal. No matter how far I go, I can still feel it, a presence that will never let me forget. The shadow will always be there, always watching, always waiting. My name is Ranger David Mills, and I've patrolled Yellowstone for over a decade. I've handled everything from lost hikers to wildlife emergencies. But nothing prepared me for the case that would haunt me for years. It began on a crisp autumn morning, with the golden leaves falling and the air carrying the faint scent of sulfur from the geysers. A young hiker, Emily, had checked in at the visitor center around 9 a.m., planning a solo trek along the Mystic Falls Trail. She was experienced, well-equipped, and confident, so I wasn't immediately concerned. But when she didn't return by dusk, the worry set in. Something about the timing felt off. Too quiet, too serene, and yet an underlying tension tugged at my instincts. I organized a small search party. We followed her intended path, scanning for footprints, broken branches, anything unusual. The trail looked ordinary at first, but the deeper we ventured, the more disorienting it became. It was as if the forest itself resisted our presence. Familiar markers disappeared, paths curved in impossible directions, and the sunlight seemed to dim unnaturally through the thick canopy. Then we found the first sign, Emily's backpack, abandoned near a boulder, neatly set down as if she had left intentionally. But there was no trail leading away from it, no footprints, no signs of struggle, nothing. A cold shiver ran down my spine. This was no ordinary disappearance. Something had claimed her, and it didn't leave evidence. We continued deeper into the forest, calling her name. Our voices seemed to vanish into the dense trees, swallowed by an unnatural silence. The further we went, the more the forest felt wrong. Branches were twisted, moss hanging in strange patterns, and every step felt heavier than the last. Suddenly, one of the search volunteers, Mark, froze. "Look," he whispered, pointing. There were faint footprints leading away from the backpack, but they weren't human. The prints were elongated, uneven, and seemed to shift direction at impossible angles. I knelt to examine them, my gut twisting. Whoever, or whatever, had taken Emily hadn't just walked, it had glided. There was no struggle, no signs of panic, just absence. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching and intertwining with the forest floor. A chill settled in, even though the day had been mild. Then, from behind a cluster of pines, I heard it. A soft, almost musical humming, delicate but eerily unnatural. It wasn't human, but it mimicked something human-like, drawing us forward. I hesitated. My instincts screamed to retreat, yet something compelled me to move. The trail twisted further into the unknown, and I realized, with growing dread, that we were no longer searching for Emily. We were being led. We followed the trail, or what we thought was the trail. The forest twisted unnaturally around us. Trees seemed to shift when I wasn't looking directly at them. and every time I glanced back, the path we had come from seemed farther than before. The humming grew louder, echoing through the woods, vibrating in my chest. My flashlight beam trembled as I scanned the underbrush. Then I saw it. Emily. She was standing still, just ahead, bathed in the waning sunlight, her eyes vacant and unblinking. "Emily!" I shouted, relief flooding me. She didn't respond. Her body was rigid, unnatural, as if she were part of the forest itself. Slowly, she lifted a hand, pointing deeper into the trees. My stomach churned. I signaled the team to stay back. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. The humming became a chorus, layered and distorted, like hundreds of whispers mingling together. I realized then that Emily wasn't leading us. She was being controlled. A sudden movement in the shadows made me spin. Figures emerged, twisted silhouettes with elongated limbs and featureless faces. They circled Emily, their gliding movements silent but deliberate. My heart pounded. Whatever had taken her had brought reinforcements, guardians of this forest secret. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. One wrong move, and we could all disappear like she had. The shadows glided closer, their featureless faces reflecting no light, only darkness. I raised my flashlight and swung it from side to side, trying to intimidate them. They didn't flinch. My rational mind screamed that these were not human. Emily remained motionless, her arms still pointing deeper into the forest. The humming reached a crescendo, vibrating through the trees, making the very air feel alive. I realized we were intruding on something ancient and malevolent. One shadow lunged toward Emily, but she didn't react. The shadow paused mid-air, hovering unnaturally before retreating. It was as if it were waiting for some signal, some permission. My heart pounded in my ears. I whispered to the team, urging caution. We needed a plan, but the forest refused to cooperate. Every familiar landmark was gone, replaced by twisted shapes and dense mist. It was a labyrinth designed to disorient, to trap. A faint voice, Emily's voice, reached my ears, soft and distorted. "Go back, or stay forever." The words were almost hypnotic. I felt my body stiffen, my instincts screaming. The shadows moved silently, surrounding her, guarding her, their intent clear. I understood then. This was no ordinary disappearance. Emily's fate was sealed unless I could outsmart whatever entity had claimed her. Desperation gripped me. I couldn't leave her. I had to act. I scanned the forest floor and noticed faint markings, symbols carved into tree trunks, almost imperceptible, glowing faintly in the dim light. They pulsed rhythmically, matching the hum. I realized these symbols might be the key. Perhaps they were a warning, a containment, or a guide. Moving slowly, I followed them, trying to keep the shadows in my peripheral vision. They glided alongside Emily, forming an unbroken barrier. The forest seemed to breathe, expanding and contracting around us. Every step felt heavier, as if the ground itself resisted. The shadow's presence was overwhelming, their silent authority suffocating. Suddenly, Emily's head snapped toward me, and her lips moved. "Do not touch the symbols," she whispered, though her voice wasn't fully her own. Panic surged, but I obeyed, realizing that interfering with them could trigger something far worse. Then, one of the shadows broke formation, sliding silently toward me. My flashlight flickered. I froze, knowing I was being judged, tested. My survival depended on understanding rules I didn't yet comprehend. The humming shifted, almost playful now, mocking. The forest had turned into a trap, a puzzle, and I had no idea what the solution was, except that one mistake could cost me everything. I crept along the symbols, every nerve screaming. The shadows mirrored my movement, gliding in eerie synchronization. Emily remained at the center, trapped in their formation, completely unresponsive. Then, the ground beneath us trembled subtly. The mist thickened, forming swirling shapes resembling faces, distorted in anguish. My stomach dropped. These shadows were more than guardians. They were extensions of the forest itself. A sudden crack echoed through the trees, and one of the symbols blazed brightly. The shadows recoiled slightly, but only momentarily. Emily shivered, her body twitching unnaturally, controlled by an unseen force. I realized I had to distract the shadows, create a gap. My hand hovered over a small flare in my pack. I didn't know if fire or light would help, but I had to try. The hum intensified, responding to my presence, almost as if the forest itself was aware of my intent. I ignited the flare, and the shadows flinched violently. Emily's body jerked toward me, and for a fleeting second, she seemed herself again. The symbols glowed brighter, their rhythm changing. I knew I had one chance to act, one chance to break whatever grip this forest had on her. I lunged forward, grabbing Emily's arm. The shadows hissed, gliding faster, but the flare's light created a fragile shield. I dragged her along the boardwalk, following the faint exit path I remembered. The forest resisted. Branches twisted, roots shifted, trying to impede us. Emily's eyes darted, briefly showing fear and recognition. "Go. Now," she whispered, still partially under their control. My adrenaline surged. The shadows hovered closer, their elongated limbs scraping the mist, a constant threat. The symbols pulsed violently now, almost screaming in light. The hum became a deafening cacophony in my mind. I forced myself to keep moving, one careful step after another, balancing speed with caution. Suddenly, a massive shadow lunged, crossing our path, its featureless face just inches away. Emily screamed, not in sound, but in sheer presence. The flare illuminated her for a split second, and the shadow recoiled as if burned. I knew that light was our only defense. With renewed urgency, I pushed forward, dragging her through the last stretch of twisting boardwalk. The forest seemed to release us reluctantly, letting us escape into the faint glow of approaching dusk. We stumbled into the clearing near the trailhead. The shadows stayed at the forest's edge, gliding silently, but they didn't pursue. Emily collapsed, finally free, trembling and exhausted. Her eyes were wide with terror, and her voice was barely a whisper. They let me go." I checked the forest once more. The mist hung thickly, and the shadows had melted back into the trees. I knew they were still there, watching, waiting for the next trespasser. The air felt heavier, charged with an intelligence beyond comprehension. Emily could barely speak, recounting only fragments. Visions of the forest bending, shadows gliding, whispers calling her name, and the symbols pulsating in hypnotic rhythm. I knew the forest wasn't just alive. It was sentient, guarding its secrets fiercely. The vanishing hiker incident had almost claimed her completely. We guided her to the ranger station. She was safe, but something inside her had shifted, a permanent imprint of the forest's presence. I realized then that Yellowstone had layers unseen by ordinary eyes, layers that should never be tested. The next few days were surreal. Reports came in from other hikers, fleeting shadows at dawn, strange whispers near trails, and subtle distortions in the forest paths. No one else was harmed, but the sense of unease was palpable. Emily remained at the station, shaken but alive. She refused to return to the forest, describing an overwhelming presence that had controlled her body and mind. Her recounting aligned with what I had witnessed. The symbols, the humming, the shadow's unnatural movements. I reviewed trail maps and confirmed that the path we had taken had shifted subtly. Landmarks were not where they should be. I couldn't explain it rationally, but the evidence was undeniable. Yellowstone had areas that defied normal spatial laws, places that belonged to something else entirely. I realized that what we had encountered was not an isolated event. The forest was a guardian, ancient and unforgiving. Those who wandered too far alone or ignored warnings risked vanishing entirely. Even now, I cannot walk certain trails without feeling eyes upon me. The forest watches, adapts, and punishes. The vanishing hiker case was a warning, not a story. And I carry it with me every patrol, a reminder of the forest's hidden horrors. Years later, I still patrol Yellowstone, but I never take the Mystic Falls Trail alone. I hear the hum sometimes, in the wind or the trees, and my skin crawls. I know the shadows are still there, lurking, always patient. Emily eventually left Yellowstone, but she's forever changed, haunted by fleeting visions, whispers, and dreams of shadows with featureless faces. Even I feel their presence, a constant reminder that Yellowstone is alive in ways most cannot perceive. The forest is patient, intelligent, and eternal. Those shadows are guardians of its secrets, punishing trespassers and claiming the careless. Emily's near vanishing was a lesson, a chilling testament to forces that cannot be reasoned with or fought. I have seen it all. The human struggles, the wildlife emergencies, the natural hazards. But nothing matches the dread of encountering something beyond understanding, something that bends reality itself. Yellowstone keeps its secrets, and it waits. Sometimes, when the wind shifts just right, I swear I hear the softest hum echoing from Mystic Falls, calling me back, reminding me that the forest never forgets. No one is safe if they tread too far alone, and the shadows will always be there, waiting,